Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. I'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Don't hold your breath quite yet, but partial indoor dining and drinking could resume in Chicago and Cook County as early as tomorrow. Both regions need to record one more day of a COVID positivity rate below 8% to trigger what state officials refer to as Tier 1 mitigations. So that means indoor dining and drinking at 25% capacity or 25 people and tables of no more than 4 people kept 6 feet away from each other. Meanwhile, Governor J.B. Pritzker announces that starting next week, anyone in Illinois over 65 or deemed an essential worker will be eligible for the vaccine. But he cautions that only a fraction of vaccines will be available to those who qualify.
We're expecting approximately 126,000 first doses to arrive next week outside of the city of Chicago. That's less than 4% of the 1B population. Until the vaccine supply improves, we will all, frankly, need to be patient.
And state health officials report more than 7,000 new cases of COVID in the last 24 hours, with 95 additional deaths. That makes for a total of 1,093,000 cases and 18,615 deaths. The 7-day test positivity rate is 6.2%. Chicago Public Schools says it expects to begin vaccinating eligible teachers and staff in the middle of next month when the district is set to receive doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Illinois is expanding vaccine eligibility on Monday, meaning school-based staff and other frontline employees will be able to start getting inoculated, though once again, vaccine availability ultimately depends on the number of doses the city gets from the federal government. CPS cautions that it will still take months to get everyone fully vaccinated. School CEO Janice Jackson says the plan is part of an ongoing effort to get all students back into class as soon as possible.
We owe these families an option, the same option that students in private and parochial schools throughout the city have had for months. And the past 2 weeks have shown us that we are able to do this safely.
Joining us now are Lynn Sweet of the Chicago Sun-Times, Mike Flannery of Fox 32 News, Craig Dellamore of WBBM News Radio, and Alex Hernandez of Block Club Chicago. Great to see all of you. Let's start with President Biden. He focused his inaugural address on unity and democracy. Take a look.
Just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever.
Mike Flannery, the talk of unity was everywhere in the Capitol on Wednesday. Can that actually translate into bipartisan legislative activity?
Well, we're seeing some of that with the quick approval of cabinet officers, even though their hearings were delayed and the Senate action was delayed compared to other incoming presidents. The proof is going to be when much tougher votes come, Paris. And I do think that while he's talking like that, President Biden is clearly not going to wait. There's already talk of a very aggressive program, giving $3,600 per child to families with a child under age 7, and then $3,000 to each child up to age 17, between 5 and 17. I mean, that's a huge program. $120 billion a year is the estimated cost of it. That's going to be clearly Joe Biden is ready to go big.
Certainly something that the left flank of the party is happy about. You saw him signing a bunch of executive orders there. Lynn, there were members of the Illinois National Guard in Washington. There were members of the Chicago Police Department as part of this massive effort to fortify the city. What did it feel like there on Wednesday?
Well, the downtown was fortified, but if you're in a residential neighborhood, it was normal. Streets, and in the days running up to it, everything was blocked off. But an inauguration, so much is designed, especially this one, to be consumed by television. And the Biden team did a magnificent job on that. And a quick point about unity. I think a lot of what Biden was trying to do is just partly talk about unity in terms of lowering the temperature so doesn't necessarily mean that you always agree, even though you try to cross the partisan divide.
And you heard Mitch McConnell and even Kevin McCarthy, on Wednesday at least, echoing similar sentiments. Craig Dellimore, we talked about all the actions he's taken so far, executive orders on refugee admittance, border separation policy, ICE enforcement. A lot of Washington journalists have talked about a new tone with the press briefings. Talk about sort of the night and day from the last administration to this one.
Well, indeed it is a very big difference. Although remember, at the beginning even of the Trump administration, there were the often briefings. The president himself was available because he always likes to give and take. It just toward the end, he backed off a lot, and his press secretary stopped giving real briefings. But still, this is a big change. But I think we also have to remember that no one's waved a magic wand and said all of this, all of the rancor of the last several months, the last year is going away. And there are still people who every time the president says something, they're tweeting about how no one can believe it. So that element is still out there.
Yeah, certainly no one believes it's going to be kumbaya going forward. Alex, Biden did introduce his immigration proposal last week. What's been the reaction in the immigrant community in Chicago?
Yeah, kind of like what Craig was saying. It's a big night and day change between the previous administration and this one. But at the same time, just because the Trump administration set the bar so low for 4 years, and even before he was president, I mean, he announced he was going to be running for president of the United States by calling Mexican people rapists and stuff. So he set the bar incredibly low to begin with. So they're, optimistic, but they're also very, very skeptical. And they just want to make sure that all these campaign promises the Biden administration, made early when he was a candidate are actually adhered to, because they do remember that he was the vice president under, Barack Obama, who for the beginning of his administration did have not a great track record when it came to immigration reform. So he has signed a series of executive orders. And then on top of that, I know he's introduced some comprehensive legislation to the Senate. But kind of touching back on the unity aspect, it's really, we're not sure how far that will go because, it's really, really unclear how the Senate is going to want to work with this Biden administration.
And a lot of that, even the rules of engagement with the 50-50 senators still being worked out. Lynn, according to Biden officials, they're inheriting almost a non-existent vaccine distribution plan. You've heard the governor and the mayor saying we're not getting a fraction of what we need. What is it that they inherited, and how do they plan to ramp that up?
Top priority of the Biden administration. We learned today, and I have a story that Senator Dick Durbin told Illinois reporters in the call we had a few hours ago that members of the Illinois National Guard may well be trained to actually administer shots. The president also in executive actions and in plans, he has to ramp up production of the vaccine, also train an army of people to give us shots and end this frustrating system, no matter your politics, of hitting your laptop at a certain time to see if you could get your appointment at Walgreens or Jewel or the CVS in your neighborhood. So we are looking for a delivery on the pledge of 100 vaccinations in 100 days. So we'll see what the Illinois share is right now. We have 13 million people in Illinois, and so far I think only about 600,000 people have actually gotten the shots.
The rate is still at a trickle. Mike Flannery, as all this happens, word comes tonight from the new Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that the impeachment trial of Donald Trump begins February 8th. Many Republicans you've heard have already started to back off. Many say that it's not even constitutional to hold this trial for a former president. Do you believe there's any universe where 17 GOP senators vote to convict?
Maybe in some far-fetched science fiction movie. I don't think that's the case right now. And I thought it was telling that Texas Senator John Cornyn, a top-ranking Republican on Capitol Hill, indicated today that he says it's pretty clear the way this is going, implying very clearly that there's not going to be a conviction in the Senate. We'll see how it plays out. Donald Trump in these matters has always been his own worst enemy. Will he, who knows? mid-February is a long way off, which is the earliest we'd get a vote on this.
And what you're saying is, who knows what comes out of this massive investigation happening in the DC U.S. Attorney's Office into what exactly went behind the January 6 riots. Craig Dellimore, there's also a big back and forth in the Senate right now over power. You know, it's 50-50, although Vice President Kamala Harris has the tie-breaking vote, and yet Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is not ready to sort of give up all of his cards quite yet. How does that power sharing agreement get negotiated?
Well, the trick will be if there is an agreement. At the moment, the Democrats have to make sure that, frankly, every senator is in his or her seat, and they have no margin for error. No one can be ill, and I think, yes, there can be a lot of talks, and maybe there will be a few things that will be allowed to get through, because I don't think the Republicans want to look like they are complete obstructionists just on principle. But I'm not sure that even within the Republicans themselves, they have finished fighting about what direction this party is going to take.
But that's a different fight than, just so our listeners know, usually at the beginning of a new session, especially when there's going to be a change of power, there is a negotiation over a rules package, and that's where we're at an impasse right now. If the majority of Democrats were bigger, then it would be easier for the Republicans. It would be harder for the Republicans to make their insistence, but we know that Mitch McConnell will take this to however far he can. But in the end, the Democrats will have the upper hand when it comes to imposing rules one way or the other. Think of it this way: it could be easy or it could be hard.
So Lynn, so what does that portend for things like the filibuster, where you need 60 votes to break a filibuster? Could Chuck Schumer decide, we're just going to get rid of that rule, we're going to just pass everything on a simple majority?
Well, on that, there is disagreement within his Democratic members, because that is what gives the majority and the minority the only reason right now to come together. And the point that, again, Senator Durbin makes, and he has talked a lot about this, is that the filibuster shouldn't be imposed at every piece of legislation, which is how it is now. It's perhaps like any other excess. It should be available but used rarely. Don't know how many senators really agree with his view.
All right. I don't know what the question is going to be on this, but I just want an excuse to show some of these Bernie Sanders memes. Unless you've been living in a hole recently, you've seen Bernie Sanders sitting down in every conceivable. There he is, the Grand Jatte, the Seurat painting at the Art Institute of Chicago. Anyone care to weigh in on their favorite Bernie Sanders meme? Oh, there he is in my apartment.
Well, I love him in a Chicago parking space calling dibs.
I like the CTA. I like the CTA.
I saw that L car. That was pretty cool.
The L car is cool.
It was funny. I went to bed last night after I filed a story on teachers. And the photograph I took were teachers doing a teach out outside. And when I woke up this morning, my sister sent me, or one of my friends sent me the image of, they had photoshopped Bernie Sanders alongside the teachers on that little chair. It was bizarre because he actually fit right in with the same kind of folding chairs that we're all using outside to do a teach.
At some point before this is over, there won't be a photograph in existence that doesn't have Bernie Sanders photoshopped in there. Let's move on to some other news. The Chicago Teachers Union voting on a walkout as CPS calls the move an illegal strike. Chicago vaccine rollout accelerating next week, and some big moves in Springfield. Alex, you've covered CTU and CPS. Overwhelming majority is authorized the next move in a possible strike action, but would this be an actual legal strike? Can they strike over CPS's plan to return to in-person learning?
Yeah, so CTU's vice president basically says that it's not really a strike because what would happen is they would be locked out of their computers. So CPS would have the ability to block them then. So it's not like they don't want to teach remotely. It's that when they attempt to teach remotely, the school district would then block them from that ability to do so. So that's where she's basically arguing it's semantics. One, that it's a strike, and then two, regarding the illegal aspect, during a press conference yesterday, where they also introduced the medical consultant they're working with to argue that it's not safe to go back.
This is Dr.
The vice president. Correct. But the vice president during that same press conference for CTU also argued that the illegal language that was touted yesterday is basically like a boilerplate form letter that the school district sends out every single time the union demands or has a demand of that nature.
As we speak here, this CPS released numbers showing that only about a fifth of eligible students in the cluster pre-K early learning package have actually gone back to in-person learning. Craig Delmore, does that tell you that CPS parents are much more reticent to send their kids back to school than perhaps CPS is letting on?
Certainly they are reticent. I think much what this is more of is a power struggle, is about what the teachers can bargain for and what they can't, and what they have a right to do. So yes, there are some teachers who were locked out of their computers and the ability to teach remotely, even when there were no students who were going to be in their classrooms. So this is really about who ends up with the upper hand.
And I want to make a note off what Craig is saying real too, is the teachers I spoke to, because I went to like 5 different schools yesterday doing those teach outs. The vast majority of the teachers I spoke to didn't want to have the entire year be remote. They basically wanted a pause on this CPS plan for a couple months until they could all get vaccinated, and preferably have a wider expansion of vaccinations for the families of students as well. So like they're asking for a pause of months. They're not asking for a pause of another entire school year.
Are there any negotiations happening, or is it still just this sort of power struggle and these power plays of voting to authorize a strike with the House of Delegates, and then CPS coming in and saying, here's our vaccination plan, and we're going to lock you out of your account if you don't go back to school? And that's to you, Alex.
Oh, they're still going to be voting on this through the weekend, and there will be more news coming on Monday and Tuesday, of course. The email I got for this evening's video conference actually got buried by a bunch of CTU and CPS press releases. I didn't see it because we've been getting these nonstop. I'm sure every other newsroom here in the city of Chicago has been getting like nonstop press releases and announcements and families reaching out about this. So.
You know, Paris, if I could just jump in, I mean, I think all of this back and forthing, these tests of strength by the union and the teachers and City Hall and the board. I mean, what we miss here is how catastrophic this last year has been for Chicago's public schools. I mean, a system that has lost hundreds of thousands of kids while I've been covering it. It is losing tens of thousands more. And those who, you know, I know families who've tried to do this remote learning. It's a joke. It's been, kids are not learning. It's a nightmare.
But we should say at the same time, Mike, that these numbers, the only 1 in 5 students eligible to go back are going back. So there might be some mixed signals being sent here from parents.
Clearly, there's confusion about what to do and whether it's really going to be a safe and secure classroom system. I understand the hesitation of parents, but I'll tell you this: for the kids, it's been an unalloyed catastrophe.
All right,
I would argue this though. If I can chime in real quick, I would argue this though, like a lot of the teachers that I spoke to, a lot of the parents that I spoke to over the last day and last week regarding all this, one of the big reasons that they probably kept their students behind, we have been asking for those numbers that Craig was talking about for the past week and a half. Basically, we wanted those hard numbers so we could see whether or not parents felt confident with the system. Apparently they weren't, and when I spoke to people, one of the things they kept on bringing up was the social distancing guidelines that were hatched out by parochial schools here in the city were all hatched out for the version of the virus that is less aggressive than the one that's already been documented in the city of Chicago. CDC guidelines and other medical professionals are basically pointing out that you really, really, really have to be on the ball with this more aggressive version. So any tiny little slip up, it can spread so much faster.
So there's a lot of concern with this new version. Now, Lynn Sweet, a colleague of ours at WCIA TV downstate, snapped some photos of Mike Madigan clearing out his Springfield apartment, or people clearing out Madigan's look, it's empty there where Madigan stays in Springfield. Do you expect that Madigan, now that he's lost his speakership, is going to resign from the State House altogether?
Speculation is, for me, my analysis is no. He doesn't want to pay the rent on the apartment. He's facing a federal indictment. Won't look good to step down. Remember, Ed Burke is still in city council. It also justifies using some political funds in case he still cares about public opinion one way or the other. So I would say cleaning out the apartment is not the key clue that it may be.
And he's still the chairman of the Democratic Party in Illinois. Lynn, is that a title he's likely to keep, even though prominent Democrats, Durbin, Duckworth, have said we would like him to step aside from that too?
Well, that is a term, and he has time left on that term, and he has shown no sign of wanting to give that up. The only reason he's not speaker now is that every 2 years you have to reestablish how the House is organized, just like we were talking about a few minutes ago in the Congress, the Senate, also the House of Representatives. So there was a peg to have him defeated. There is no mechanism like that right now because he still has, I think, at least a year left in his term as state party chairman. And in this case, the only people that could oust him, if they all got together, could maybe figure out a way, are the 36 members of the state central committee. So it's a small group. So far, we take their soundings all the time. None of them have been inclined to throw Madigan out.
So he's still going to wield enormous power in that position. Craig Dellimore, the new Speaker of the House, Chris Welch, announced a leadership team this week. Notably, none of the women who ran against him for Speaker or ran against Speaker Madigan before Welch even got in the race are on this new leadership team. Does that tell you there's some kind of retaliation of some sort?
I don't know about that. I think it has more to do with trying to blend the old and the new. His top two lieutenants are the same people who were the top two under Madigan, and that's Greg Harris and Jahan Gordon Smith. I forgot.
Jahan Gordon Booth. Gordon Booth.
Yes, thank you. So they're the top two, but they're bringing in a few newer and more, younger people. And frankly, one of the people who did announce running for him, Gene Hoffman, is still on leadership. So I think it's kind of a blend.
Mike Flannery, Welch has come out of the gate talking about things like term limits for the speakership. Are we confident that he is acting completely independently here and not at the blessing of Mike Madigan in some respect?
I'll tell you, anybody who thinks that Chris Welch is going to take marching orders from Mike Madigan, it is a fool. That's not the kind of guy that Welch is. He's his own man. He's a very smart, sharp operator who has played the patronage politics game for many years when he was the superintendent there in Proviso Township in the school district there. And he's not, look, I think some of the moves he's made on personnel are going to show that he will play some of the same game Mike Madigan played in terms of relying on people, he's not an intuitive reformer. On the other hand, he knows that if he wants to stay the 10 years, he has promised a 10-year term limit as Speaker. If he wants to finish out that full 10 years, it may be smart for him to make some moves. I know Republicans are hoping that he's serious about this fair maps thing with redistricting about to get underway. If I were them, I wouldn't count on it.
I agree. So out of the question. That's the whole point. What's the point of having power if you don't use it? I'm not saying this as a advocate of rigged maps where you put your thumbs, all the ones you could find on the scale, but that seems the point of map making, is to give your party a partisan advantage.
And that's certainly what each party that controls each state is going to do, Republican or Democrat. I have to talk about this jockeying that happened. State Senator Heather Staines, she abruptly resigns right after being reelected. State Representative Kelly Cassidy is a front runner for her seat. What's going on behind the scenes here, Mike?
Well, I'll tell you, remember, Representative Cassidy voted present on Chris Welch. She was the only Democrat to vote present, if I'm not mistaken. And then she put out a statement saying that she's concerned and wants a vigorous, full review of those two incidents of alleged domestic abuse. They date back some years. One of them dates back 20 years, involving Speaker Welch. He has not outright denied wrongdoing, but what he has said, Welch, is that, well, this was a long time ago. That doesn't represent the man I am today. That wasn't good enough for Representative Cassidy.
Mike, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to continue this conversation next week. Cassidy did not run for that speaker position, by the way, although she floated her name. But we're gonna have ample time to talk about all these machinations. But for now, we're out of time. So my thanks to Lynn Sweet, Mike Flannery, Craig Dellamore, and Alex Hernandez. And that is our show for this Friday night. We're back at 7 o'clock next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.